3 years ago, nobody outside a research lab knew his name. Today, he just knocked billions off American AI stocks with a single presentation. His name is Yang Zhilin. 3 years ago, he turned down a job offer from Apple and got on a plane back to China instead. No headlines, no fanfare, just a small team of old college friends and a company named after his favorite Pink Floyd album. Fast forward to July 2026, that company is now valued at over $20 billion. Its newest AI model just outranked Anthropic's own frontier model on key benchmarks and sent global tech stocks lower in the process. And right now, somewhere in a boardroom in San Francisco, someone is rewriting their roadmap because of what this one man built. Here's the strange part. This isn't a story about luck. It's a story about what happens when raw scale beats clever tricks, and about the one person who understood that faster than almost anyone else. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how a rejected job applicant became one of the most important men in artificial intelligence, and why what he built might already be shaping the AI tools you use every single day.
Let's rewind. Before the $20 billion valuation, before the stage at NVIDIA's biggest conference of the year, before any of that, Yang Zhilin was just a kid born in 1992 in a coastal city in southern China called Shantou. And here's something most people don't know about him. He once dreamed of becoming a rock star or a wandering poet, not a founder, not an engineer, a poet. He enrolled at Tsinghua University, China's answer to MIT, to study thermal engineering. Then he read a novel, a Haruki Murakami novel to be exact, and something in him shifted. He switched his major to computer science right in the middle of his degree. Think about that for a second. The man who'd go on to help build one of the most talked about AI models on Earth almost spent his career studying heat transfer instead of neural networks. One novel changed the direction of his entire life, and he didn't stop being a musician either. He started a rock band at Tsinghua called Splay, a nerdy inside joke named after a data structure where he played the drums and wrote the songs. His academic advisor at the time was a professor named Jie Tang. Small detail, huge foreshadowing, because Jie Tang would later co-found Zhipu AI, known internationally as ZA, one of the very companies that would go on to become Yang's biggest rival in China's AI race. Everybody in this story, it turns out, already knew each other. Now here's where it picks up. Yang left China to chase his PhD at Carnegie Mellon University, one of the top computer science schools in the entire United States. He wrapped it up in just 4 years, fast even by Carnegie Mellon's own standards. He studied under two names worth remembering: Ruslan Salakutendorf, who'd later become Apple's own director of AI research, and William Cohen, who'd go on to become a principal scientist at Google DeepMind. While still a student, Yang interned at both Google Brain and Meta, shoulder to shoulder with some of the sharpest minds in the field. And during that time, he co-authored 2 research papers most people watching this have never heard of, but that quietly shaped the AI tools you use every single day. They're called Transformer XL and XNet. Here's the plain English version. Back then, AI language models had a memory problem. They could only see a small chunk of text at a time, like reading a novel through a mail slot 1 page at a time with zero idea what came before. Transformer XL and XNet were early, serious attempts to fix exactly that, to let a model hold on to more context, to connect the dots across a much longer stretch of text. Sound familiar?
Every time you're impressed that ChatGPT or Claude can remember your whole conversation or read an entire document in one shot, you're looking at the great-grandchildren of ideas Yang Zhilin helped publish as a PhD student. He wasn't just building AI later on. He was there, years earlier, laying bricks the whole industry still stands on. By 2019, Yang had graduated, and by most accounts, he was one of the most sought-after young researchers in the field. Big American tech companies came calling. Apple offered him a job. And here's the twist a lot of people in the US are still arguing about today. He said no. He packed his things and went home to China. Now, why would one of the best trained AI minds on American soil turn down Silicon Valley?
His own PhD advisor has actually tried to answer that publicly. Solikatinidov has pointed out that plenty of his international students do choose to stay in the US. This wasn't some universal rule. But he's also been honest about the other side of it. He said the American immigration process can be quite intimidating and uncertain, even for superstar PhD graduates. Visa lotteries, years of waiting, the kind of uncertainty most people never have to think about. For some of the most talented people on the planet, staying in America isn't just a career decision, it's a bureaucratic gamble. And that's the quieter side of this whole AI race that never makes it into the flashy headlines. The United States built some of the best AI research programs on Earth. It trained Yang Zhilin. And then, one visa process, one career decision at a time, some of that talent walks back out the door and goes to build the competition instead. Is that an immigration policy problem, a talent retention failure, or just one man's personal choice? Depends who you ask. But watch what happens next and you'll understand why people in Washington are asking that question so urgently right now. Because the kid who once dreamed of being a poet was about to build a company that would rattle the American stock market. If you're finding this story as wild as I am, do me a favor. Hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and come back every day. We cover stories like this one all the time. Now, let's get back to it, because next, Yang Zhilin walks back into China with nothing but a resume, a small circle of old classmates, and an idea Silicon Valley would eventually be forced to take very seriously. Serious enough, in fact, that the White House itself would later have some very pointed questions about exactly how he built what came next.
So Yang Zhilin gets on that plane and heads back to China. No job at Apple, no Silicon Valley address, just a plan. His first move wasn't Moonshot AI, by the way. It was something much smaller. Back in 2016, Yang co-founded a company called Recurrent AI, a startup that used AI to analyze sales conversations, helping businesses figure out what was actually working in their pitch calls. Think of it as the dress rehearsal, not the headline act, just practice, learning how to turn research into something people would actually pay for. Around that same time, Yang also worked on Huawei's Pangu model and on the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence's Wu Dao project, two of China's biggest early bets on large-scale AI. In other words, before he built his own thing, he spent years inside the machine, learning how China trains, funds, and scales its AI at a national level. Then, in early 2023, everything sped up. ChatGPT had just detonated across the entire world, and suddenly every serious AI researcher on Earth was asking the same question. Can I build something like this too? So in March 2023, Yang co-founded a company called Moonshot AI, alongside two old schoolmates from Tsinghua University, Zhou Xinyu and Wu Yuxin. And remember that band Yang started back in college? One of these two co-founders was literally the lead guitarist in it. This wasn't some cold corporate merger of strangers. This was old friends picking up instruments again, except this time the instrument was a language model. Here's my favorite detail in this whole story. Moonshot AI launched on the exact 50th anniversary of Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, Yang's favorite album of all time, and the direct inspiration for the company's name. In Chinese, the company is literally called Dark Side of the Moon, a billion-dollar AI lab named after a rock album by a guy who once wanted to be a poet. Try to picture the equivalent happening in San Francisco. It just doesn't happen there the same way. Investors quickly grouped Moonshot in with a small cluster of buzzy Chinese startups nicknamed the AI Tigers, the local answer to America's frontier labs. And Yang was blunt about what he was actually trying to build. Not a chatbot, not a feature. He said his real goal was building foundation models on the road to AGI, artificial general intelligence, anchored by 3 milestones: longer context, true multimodal understanding, and eventually a system that could keep improving itself without a human hand guiding every step. And underneath all of it sat one guiding belief, which he's repeated in interviews ever since. Don't reach for a clever new algorithm when raw scale can solve the problem for you.
The whole point of a smarter algorithm, in his view, is just to let you scale even further. That's not a slogan, that's basically the operating manual for everything Moonshot has shipped since. And the first proof of it came fast. On October 9, 2023, barely 7 months after founding the company, Moonshot released Kimi Chat, an AI assistant capable of reading 200,000 Chinese characters in a single input. At the time, that was the longest context window of any commercially available model on the planet. What does that actually mean for you? Imagine an AI that can't just answer one question, but can sit down and read your entire contract, your entire thesis, months of chat history, and still remember page 1 by the time it reaches the end. That's the difference between a goldfish and a librarian. And it worked. By 2024, Kimi had climbed to become the third most used AI chatbot in all of China. 2 years in, old college friends, a rock album name, already top 3 in the biggest AI market on Earth. This is the part of the story where you'd expect the music to swell, right? Clean victory, roll credits. But that's not what happened. Because in January 2025, a rival Chinese lab called DeepSeek released a model called R1, and it didn't just compete, it detonated. DeepSeek's R1 disrupted the entire Chinese AI landscape overnight, and Moonshot was one of the hardest hit. Kimi, which had been sitting comfortably at 3rd place, collapsed all the way down to 7th. Just like that. Overnight, top 3 in China became afterthought. Picture spending 2 years climbing a mountain and watching someone else build an elevator right next to you. So here's the real question this story hinges on. What do you do when your best product just got buried by a smarter, cheaper competitor practically overnight? Do you quietly fade out like most startups do? Or do you rip up the playbook completely and come back swinging in a way nobody saw coming? Because that's exactly what Yang Zhilin did next, and it's the pivot that turned Moonshot from a startup that used to be relevant into the company now rattling American stock markets.
So Moonshot just got knocked from 3rd place to 7th almost overnight. Most companies in that spot do one of 2 things. They panic and rush out something half-baked, or they quietly go silent for a year and hope nobody notices. Yang Zhilin did neither. Instead, he made a decision that looked, on paper, completely insane. He decided to give away the crown jewels, for free. In July 2025, Moonshot released a brand new model called Kimi K2, and instead of locking it behind an app or an API, they open-sourced it under what's called a modified MIT license. Let's slow down on what that actually means, because it's the whole hinge of this story. Companies like OpenAI and Anthropic mostly keep their best models closed. You get the finished dish, you don't get the recipe. Open weight means Moonshot handed out the recipe. Anyone, a developer, a university, a rival company, could download K2's actual weights, run it on their own servers, and build on top of it without paying Moonshot a cent in licensing. Under the hood, K2 was a mixture of experts with 1 trillion total parameters, only 32 billion of which activate for any given task. Think of it less like one giant brain firing all at once, and more like a massive team of specialists where only the right experts show up for each specific job. The reaction was immediate. People started calling it another DeepSeek moment, the same shockwave DeepSeek's R1 had caused 6 months earlier, except this time Moonshot was the one causing it. Within a single day of release, K2 became the fastest downloaded model on Hugging Face, the platform where the entire AI developer community goes to grab new models. That's not a marketing win. That's thousands of engineers at the same moment deciding this was worth their time. And here's the part that should really get your attention. Running K2 through a full benchmark test cost roughly 27 cents. Doing the same test on GPT 5.2 cost 48 cents. On Claude Opus 4.5, it cost $1.14. Same job, roughly 5 times the price difference. If you're a small dev team or a startup, or honestly just someone building a side project, which one of those would you reach for? That's the quiet part of this AI race that doesn't always make headlines. It's not only about who's the smartest, it's about who's smart enough
cheap enough, and available enough that everyone just starts building on top of you by default. And Moonshot didn't stop at one release and take a victory lap. K2 Thinking landed in November 2025, adding deeper reasoning. K2.5 arrived in January 2026 with something called Agent Swarm Mode, a system that can coordinate up to 100 smaller AI agents working in parallel on the same problem, like an orchestra conductor, except every musician in that orchestra is its own little AI, each handling one piece of a bigger task. Then K2.6 in April, then K2.7 Code in June 2026, a version tuned specifically for programming, cutting the amount of thinking, the model needs by around 30% to get to the same answer. That's 5 major releases in under a year, roughly one every 2 months, a pace faster than any closed-source lab in the world managed over that same stretch. Let that sink in for a second. While plenty of American labs were carefully polishing one flagship release, Moonshot was shipping, testing, and iterating in public again and again and again. And this wasn't just an academic flex. Coding tools are turning into serious money in this industry. Anthropic disclosed that its own Claude Code product had crossed $1 billion in annualized revenue. So Moonshot built its own answer, Kimi Code, an open-source coding assistant that defaults to Kimi's models but can plug into others too, aimed squarely at pulling developers away from the closed-source giants. Think about the arc here for a second. A year and a half earlier, this company had just been humiliated, dropped to 7th place in its own home market. Now it was setting the pace for the entire open-source AI world, with American developers, not just Chinese ones, downloading its models by the millions. That's not luck. That's a company that got knocked down and instead of playing it safe, decided the fastest way back up was to sprint straight past everyone else. And this relentless shipping cadence is exactly what set the stage for the model that would eventually shake Wall Street itself. But we'll get there. If this story's got you hooked the way it's got me, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and come back tomorrow. We post stories just like this one all the time. Now, let's talk about the money. Because while all of this was happening, some of the biggest companies in China, the ones you already use every single day without realizing it, were quietly pouring billions of dollars into this one man's bet. Let's talk about the money now, because this is where the story stops sounding like a scrappy startup tale and starts sounding like a bet placed by some of the biggest companies on the planet. Go back to October 2023. Moonshot AI was barely 6 months old. At that point, its very first backers, a Chinese venture firm called Hongshan, formerly known as Sequoia China, along with an early-stage fund called Zen Fund, put in enough money to value the whole company at roughly $300 million. $300 million for 3 guys, a rock band founder, and an idea. Now watch what happens next. Just 4 months later, in February 2024, Alibaba stepped in and led a funding round of more than $1 billion, with Sequoia Capital China, Meituan, and the social media company Xiaohongshu all joining in. That single round pushed Moonshot's valuation 8 times higher to around $2.5 billion. Read that again. 8 times the valuation in 4 months. Imagine putting your life savings into something worth $300,000 and watching it get marked up to $2.5 million before the year is even over. That's the pace we're talking about here. And Alibaba wasn't just being generous. Think of Alibaba as China's version of Amazon crossed with Google. When a company like that writes a billion-dollar check, it's not charity, it's a calculated bet on who's going to matter in the next decade of Chinese tech. 6 months later, in August 2024, Tencent, think of it as China's version of Meta, jumped in too, alongside a firm called Gaorong Capital, pushing the valuation up again to around $3 billion. So now, picture this lineup. Alibaba and Tencent, 2 companies that in almost any other context are fierce rivals, both quietly betting on the exact same 30-something founder. That's not a small signal. That's 2 giants who normally don't agree on much, agreeing on him. Now, fast growth like this rarely comes without friction, and this story's no exception. Some of Moonshot's earlier, smaller investors, firms like GSR Ventures, weren't able to keep pace as the bigger players piled in, and as the valuation kept climbing, a handful of those early backers reportedly raised objections over how their stakes were being handled, a dispute that eventually headed to arbitration. It's a reminder that even the cleanest success story usually has a messier footnote somewhere behind it. Big money moving fast tends to leave a few bruised relationships in its wake. But the checks kept coming anyway. By December 2025, Moonshot closed a $500 million Series C, led by IDG Capital, which alone put in $150 million. That round was oversubscribed, meaning more investors wanted in than there was room for, with Alibaba, Tencent, and even a co-founder of Meituan personally joining, pushing the valuation to $4.3 billion. At that point, Moonshot was sitting on more than $1 billion in cash reserves, with reportedly zero urgency to go public. And this next detail matters because it tells you exactly where that money was headed. Yang Zhilin told investors directly that this capital would fund a massive expansion of GPU infrastructure, the raw computing horsepower needed to train one specific upcoming model. A model we haven't even talked about yet. We'll get there very soon. Meanwhile, the business underneath all of this wasn't just theoretical hype. Moonshot reported a 170% monthly growth rate in global paid users, with API revenue quadrupling since the previous November. Real users, real revenue, not just headlines. Then came May 2026, and this is the round that finally pushed the number past $20 billion. This time, the round was led by Meituan's investment arm, contributing more than $200 million on its own, and joined by new names like Tsinghua Capital, China Mobile, and a fund called CPE Yuanfang. Notice who just walked in the door there. China Mobile, state-linked capital. All while Alibaba, Tencent, Hongshan, Zen Fund, IDG Capital, and 5Y Capital stayed on the cap table too. Private tech giants, and now the state itself, sitting at the same table, backing the same founder. Add it all up, and in under 3 years, Moonshot AI pulled in close to $4 billion in total funding, starting from a $300 million seed valuation, all the way to a company worth more than $20 billion. Here's the question worth sitting with for a second. When Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, and eventually China's own state-linked funds all decide to bet on the same 34-year-old founder, what does that tell you about how seriously China is treating this race? Because money like that doesn't move on vibes. It moves when the people writing the checks are convinced something big is coming. And in July 2026, they turned out to be exactly right.
July 16, 2026. NVIDIA's GTC, the GPU Technology Conference, one of the biggest stages in the entire tech industry. And walking out onto that stage isn't an American CEO in a hoodie. It's Yang Zhilin, standing on NVIDIA's own platform, unveiling a model built, in his own words, to go head-to-head with the best America has ever produced. The model is called Kimi K3, and the specs alone are enough to make your jaw drop a little. 2.8 trillion parameters, a 1 million token context window, meaning this thing can hold roughly the length of several full novels in its head at once and still track every detail. Native multimodal understanding, so it's not just reading text, it's handling images and more all in one system. And once again, fully open weight, the largest open source AI model ever released, period. Here's the part that should genuinely stop you for a second. Independent evaluators at Artificial Analysis, one of the most respected AI benchmarking groups out there, scored K3 high enough to place it in the same tier as Claude Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5. On some frontier benchmarks, it actually edged ahead of Opus 4.8. Read that again. An open-weight model built by a company that got humiliated down to 7th place in its own home market just 18 months ago, just outscored one of the most advanced closed AI systems on the planet on at least some tests. And true to form, Moonshot priced it aggressively, just $3 per million input tokens,
$15 per million output tokens, cheap enough to make competitors nervous, the same disruptive playbook DeepSeek used the year before. The reaction was immediate, and it wasn't subtle. Tech stocks dipped, chip stocks wobbled, the kind of ripple usually reserved for actual American frontier labs. In China, it went further than that. It went viral. A hashtag translating roughly to "Post-90s Tsinghua Genius crashed US stocks" racked up over 30 million views in a single day. People started calling him a millennial genius. Demand got so intense that within 48 hours, Moonshot had to temporarily pause new subscriptions just to keep the servers standing. This is the moment the story was supposed to end on a high note. The comeback complete, the underdog wins, roll credits. Except 6 days later, things took a much sharper turn. On July 22nd, Michael Kratsios, the White House's Director of Science and Technology Policy, made a public accusation. He said Moonshot AI had engaged in large-scale, covert distillation of Anthropic's Fable model to help build Kimi K3.
Let's unpack what that actually means, because the word distillation gets thrown around a lot. Distillation is a real, legitimate AI training technique, where a smaller or newer model learns by studying the outputs of a more powerful one. Done at a small scale, it's common and it's legal. What Kratsios described was something bigger than that, an organized, industrial-scale operation, allegedly built to systematically pull capabilities out of an American frontier model and pour them into a Chinese one. He also claimed Moonshot had gotten its hands on restricted NVIDIA hardware through servers based in Thailand, chips that are supposed to be blocked from reaching Chinese companies entirely under US export rules. Here's why the timing made people suspicious in the first place. Anthropic's Fable model went public on July 1st. Kimi K3 launched just 15 days later. 15 days to train a frontier-level model from scratch is an almost impossible timeline, which is exactly the detail fueling the accusation. But here's where it gets messier, because this isn't a settled fact, it's a dispute playing out in real time. A Moonshot employee fired back on social media, pointing out the absurdity of the accusation from their side. "We trained a brand new frontier model in just 15 days, he wrote, essentially daring anyone to believe that was even possible without something else going on, treating it less like a confession and more like a boast. And a number of independent AI researchers pushed back too, calling the accusation political rather than technical, and pointing out something important. An AI model's output isn't copyrighted material, and distillation itself isn't automatically theft. As of right now, Moonshot AI hasn't issued an official response. No penalties have been announced either. The full K3 model weights are set to go fully public soon, which, if it happens, would let independent researchers actually dig into the architecture and settle some of this for themselves. And if this whole situation sounds familiar, that's because it is. Back in January 2025, a different White House official made an almost identical accusation against DeepSeek, claiming they'd copied OpenAI's models. DeepSeek denied it. Nothing was ever formally proven either way, which tells you something important about where we actually are in this story. This isn't a one-time scandal. It's becoming a pattern. Every time a Chinese lab produces something that legitimately rivals the best American technology, the same question gets asked almost immediately. Did they actually build this, or did they just copy their way here? And notice the irony sitting underneath all of it. The man standing at the center of this controversy spent years training inside American universities, American research labs, alongside American mentors. Some of the very same knowledge the US spent years building into him is now the knowledge Washington is accusing him of stealing back out of America through the side door. Is he China's brightest homegrown success story? Or is he, as some in Washington now seem to fear, something closer to China's most effective secret weapon? A man built partly by America itself, now working against it. The truth is, right now, nobody outside of Moonshot's own servers actually knows for certain. But one thing is completely undeniable. Whatever K3 actually is, copied, original, or some messy mix of both,
It worked exactly the way Yang Zhilin has always said things should work. Not with a clever trick, with scale, with speed, and just enough audacity to make the entire American AI industry stop and pay very close attention. Let's talk about what happened to the money after K3 dropped, because numbers like this don't happen slowly, they happen in weeks. Back in April 2026, Moonshot's annual recurring revenue, basically the yearly income it can count on from subscriptions and API usage, sat at around $200 million. By June, just 2 months later, that number had jumped to $300 million. And once K3 actually launched in mid-July, daily sales reportedly surged by at least 6 times almost overnight. 6 times in days, not years. Remember, this is the same company that got knocked down to 7th place in its own home market barely 18 months earlier. Now picture the opposite problem. So many people trying to sign up at once that the servers couldn't keep up, and Moonshot had to hit pause on new subscriptions just to keep the lights on. That's not a company struggling to find customers. That's a company struggling to keep up with how many people suddenly want in. So naturally, the valuation kept climbing right alongside it. Remember that $20 billion number from the funding round back in May? That was already massive, but within weeks of K3's launch, Moonshot was reportedly in talks for a new round that could value the company at up to $50 billion. $20 billion to $50 billion in roughly 2 months. Let that sink in for a second. That's not growth. That's a company whose price tag is moving faster than most people can even update their mental picture of it. And here's where the story takes its next big turn. Moonshot is now actively preparing for an IPO on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, reportedly within about 6 months, meaning sometime around early 2027. To make that happen, the company is even restructuring its ownership setup, unwinding a legal structure that used to let foreign investors buy in through an offshore workaround and replacing it with something that fits China's newer listing rules more cleanly. 2 major investment banks are reportedly already circling to help run the offering. And when the news of this IPO push broke, it didn't just affect Moonshot. Shares in 2 of its biggest domestic rivals, also part of that AI Tiger group, actually dropped that same day, one falling by roughly a quarter of its value, the other by close to a fifth. Investors looked at Moonshot suddenly making a move toward the public markets and started reshuffling money away from its competitors in real time. That's the kind of ripple effect you only get when a single company becomes the center of gravity for an entire industry almost overnight. Now, let's talk about Yang Zhilin himself for a second. Reports suggest he still holds a personal stake in Moonshot somewhere north of 50%. At current valuations, that stake alone is reportedly worth somewhere in the range of $16 billion. $16 billion for a man who, 3 years ago, was deciding between a corporate job offer and a plane ticket home. And here's something that might surprise you. Despite all of this, multiple reports describe him as genuinely reclusive, not chasing headlines, not doing a press tour, not turning himself into a Twitter personality the way plenty of American tech founders do. He built one of the most talked about companies in the entire AI industry, and mostly just let the model do the talking for him. Now, zoom out for a moment, because this is bigger than one founder and bigger than one company. There's a stat worth sitting with here. By most estimates, the United States still spends something like 23 times more on AI overall than China does. 23 times the spending. And yet Chinese labs keep closing the gap anyway, not by matching America dollar for dollar, but by moving faster, open sourcing aggressively, and pricing everything to undercut the competition before it can even react. One policy analyst put it simply: the technology gap between the US and China has closed far quicker than most people expected, and that changes the entire conversation happening in Washington right now about export controls, about chip restrictions, about who's actually allowed to buy what hardware. Because here's the uncomfortable question underneath all of it. If a company like Moonshot can build a frontier-class model on a fraction of the spending, using open-source strategies and aggressive pricing, what exactly is all that American spending actually buying if the gap keeps closing anyway? Is it buying more time, a bigger lead, or just a more expensive version of the same finish line? Nobody in Washington has a clean answer to that yet. And whether you see Yang Zhilin as a brilliant engineer who simply built something better, or as a symbol of exactly the kind of talent and technology the US is worried about losing control of, one thing is no longer up for debate. 3 years ago, almost nobody outside a research lab could have told you his name. Today, boardrooms in San Francisco, government offices in Washington, and a hashtag with 30 million views in China are all talking about the exact same person. And that's genuinely rare, because we're not just talking about one really good AI model anymore. We're talking about what happens when the balance of power in the most important technology race on Earth shifts because of one person's decisions. So let's bring this whole story home, from a kid who wanted to be a poet all the way to a name now sitting on watch lists in Washington. Let's go back to one single moment in this whole story. Not the money, not the stage at NVIDIA, just one moment. The moment Kimi dropped from 3rd place in China all the way down to 7th. 2 years of work, buried almost overnight by a single competitor's launch. That's the moment that actually matters here. Everything else, the $20 billion, the talk of $50 billion, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, all of it comes after this one fork in the road. Because here's what usually happens to a team in that exact spot. They protect what's left. They go quiet. They wait for the bruise to heal before trying anything bold again. Most people, the moment they get hurt, choose safety. Yang Zhilin didn't. At the exact point his product looked weakest, he gave away the one thing most companies never let go of, the model itself, fully open, for free, to anyone who wanted it. That's not a move you make when you're winning. That's a move you only make when you've got nothing left to protect and everything left to prove. And here's one thing worth sitting with, whether you build AI models or not. The lead never actually belongs to whoever's out in front. It belongs to whoever keeps moving after they've been knocked down. Being ahead just means you haven't been tested yet. Being behind is when you actually find out who you are. Think about the last time something got taken from you. A job, a position, momentum you'd spent years building, gone in a single season. What did you do with what was left? Did you protect it? Or did you do the uncomfortable thing, the thing that looks like giving something away right when you can least afford to? You don't need trillion parameter models or export controls to feel that question. It's just wearing bigger numbers here. What do you do the moment you're no longer the one out in front? 3 years ago, a plane took off from the United States carrying a researcher nobody outside a lab could have named. Somewhere over the Pacific on that flight, he was still just a guy with a PhD and a job offer he'd turned down. He didn't know yet that he'd fall to 7th place before any of this worked. He just knew he'd rather build something and risk losing than sit somewhere safe and never find out. Sit with that for a second. Now, if this one actually landed, don't just let it disappear into the feed. Follow the channel so the next one finds you instead of the algorithm deciding you never see it. Send this to 5 people, genuinely 5, the kind of people who'd sit with that same question the way you probably just did. And leave a real comment below. Not great video. Tell me what actually got to you here, or where you think I got something wrong. And tell me who you want next. Another founder, another country, another one of these stories already moving faster than anyone in charge seems to realize. I'll see you in the next one.